Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to our public information meeting regarding the establishment of a new post-primary school to serve Booterstown, Blackrock and Dun Laoghaire. My name is Jerry McKevitt. I'm a new schools officer for Educate Together and I will be hosting and presenting this evening. I'd also like to introduce Paul Mulhall, who's the principal of Sandymount Park Educate Together Secondary School. We'll also have a student, which may not be the student that's on your screen at the moment. We're just having some technical difficulties at our end, but we will have a student speaking as well. And hopefully we'll have Danny McRae, who's a parent, who's part of our parent-led campaign group, who will speak as well. So thanks for joining us. This is an interactive meeting. We'll have a presentation going in the background, hopefully with some useful information. We also have a live question and answer session going as we move along. Now, depending on what platform you're using, whether you're using a laptop or a desktop or a mobile phone, might be different in each one. But look out for the Q&A button, click that. You can pop your questions in there as we go along. We'll try and answer them as we go along as well with our various speakers, and at the end we'll have an opportunity at the end to go through that. Your name won't be published with the questions, just to let you know. We're also recording this meeting, and we'll make it available tomorrow on our website and on social media, etc. And we'll also try to collate all the questions that come in into a document that we can put up and you can download at your leisure. But just please bear in mind that it's only the speakers whose video and audio will be heard tonight, so none of you will show up in the recording of the public meeting as we go forward. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about Educate Together, who we are and what we do. So the first Educate Together school opened in Dalkey in 1978. It's after taking us 42 years to try and open a second level school here. And also one of our newer Educate Together schools, which is Cherrywood, just opened down the road last year. So there are 95 primary schools in total. We also have 19 secondary schools, and we've over 30,000 students. And just to break that down regarding second level, we're patron of 15 voluntary secondary schools, which is what we're proposing to open in 2021. We're also joint patron of 2 community schools. We're what's called trustee partner in 2 community colleges, and 2 further community colleges are in transition. And this year we're applying for patronage of 2 new post-primary schools for next year: Booterstown, Blackrock and Dun Laoghaire, and in Galway County Wexford. So Educate Together as a patron of primary and secondary schools. So we call ourselves equality based. We're co-educational, student-centred, democratically run, and we have an ethical education programme. So just to take these one at a time and maybe discuss them a little bit. So in terms of equality based, we're not just talking about everybody being equal in our schools, which they obviously are, but we're also talking about equality of outcomes as well, and how we distribute and use resources. So what we aim to do is when children leave our schools, or when students leave our school at 18, 19 years of age, that they've had the fullest education experiences that they can. We're co-educational. That's obviously boys and girls being educated together in the same school and the same classrooms, but it's also a little bit more than that as well. So what we try to do is instill equality as well in our co-educational, but we treat boys and girls the same, and we put great emphasis on leadership and developing cooperation between all the students. School is student-centred, which means that not only are the classes that are delivered by our educators centred around the student, but indeed every activity that happens in the school, board of management meetings, extracurricular activities, should also be student-centred as well. So every decision that the board makes, or every decision that the PTA makes, should be student-centred and have the student at the centre of everything that it does. Democratically run, our schools are founded by parents, and we expect a lot from our parents to get involved in their schools. We wouldn't exist without parents, and our organisation wouldn't exist without the parents from Dalkey in 1978. And it's their spirit and which runs through our movement to this day. We also have an ethical education program, which deals with all issues. And once again, it's not a prescribed program that's a top-down program from Educate Together's patron, but the education program that's taught in each of our schools is developed within the schools with active participation by parents, educators and students, and also by the Educate Together movement in general. Okay, so I might just pause there for a minute and I'm just going to have a quick glance and see if there's anything I can talk about at the moment. Let me see. Okay, so there's a question in just about the application process and how final or who makes the decision. I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but absolutely, the Department of Education collate all the information that comes in, and they make a report, and the report goes to a group called the New Schools Advisory Group, and they more or less make the decision on who should be awarded patronage. Generally, it's whoever gets the most votes as part of the process wins the patronage. I don't think it's been any other way. So, but listen, I can come back to that later on, and we can discuss that further. So, I just have to. So I'm going to move on to the first of our speakers for this evening. So I'd like to introduce Paula Mulhall. Paula is principal of Sandymount Park Educate Together Secondary School. That's one of our newer Educate Together secondary schools opened that serves the Dublin 2, Dublin 4 and Dublin 6 areas. So I might just introduce Paula and get her to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. As Jerry said, I'm principal of Sandymount Park Educate Together Secondary School, which is quite close by. Really, our catchment area will touch off the catchment area for this new school. And I suppose this evening I want to talk about being involved in a startup. Of course, that's really exciting. Creating a school community from the ground up presents wonderful opportunities for students, staff and families. But I suppose more to the point, I want to share with you the specific advantages that the Educate Together ethos brings to a startup school. So in our schools, the Educate Together ethos is key to all that we do. And the most obvious facets, as Jerry pointed out there, are that students wear no uniform, we use first names with students, teachers and parents, we are co-ed with equality of opportunity, regardless of social, cultural or religious backgrounds. But a central and defining facet of Educate Together secondary schools is that they are learner-centred. So that means the well-being and development of the student is the heart of all decision-making policies and practice. And so the Educate Together ethos grounds us in the belief that students learn best when they experience a strong sense of belonging. And a sense of belonging comes about through being stimulated in your learning and connected, involved in school life. So students will flourish when they are progressing, they're involved and connected through the building of positive relationships and actively engaged in the life of the school. And the recent ESRI study, which I'm sure some of you might have seen if you follow it on social media, Educate Together students report a strong sense of belonging. And this is a powerful indicator of a child's experience and success in school. Another significant finding from the ESRI study is how committed Educate Together school leaders are. And so what this means really is that in the day-to-day running of the school, there is an ongoing focus on those things that are very important to us within the Educate Together ethos. And that is student voice, innovation in teaching and learning, and the building of strong positive relationships. And I suppose just to talk to you about those key areas and what they mean for Educate Together schools in general, and I suppose obviously I'll be putting my slant on it and how we see things in Sandymount Park, but I think it's probably true of most Educate Together secondary schools. The student voice is one of our defining features, and what it means is that we put our students at the heart of all our policies and practices, and importantly we involve them in the decision making where appropriate. So we actively seek out students' opinions and feedback, and that's just part of day-to-day life inside and outside the classroom. So for example, with the learning, teachers will consult with students about how they're getting on, what teaching and learning methods are most effective, you know, down to small things around seating plans, We run focus groups. I know in Sandymount Park, myself and the deputy principal run focus groups with students twice a year to just find out how they're getting on, what's going well, what's not going well, what could we do differently. And we also do that at subject department level, and then within some of the key organisations within schools, such as the Student Council, the Green Schools, the GSA Alliance. And of course, we also have student associate members on the Board of Management. And so their voices are heard at Board of Management meetings, and that's very significant. We also ensure that that opportunity for the student voice to be heard is evident within co and extracurricular activities. So, for example, we have a student newspaper where students have an opportunity to express themselves and showcase their interests. I know in some of the other Educate Together secondary schools, this is demonstrated. For example, I know in Limerick there's a huge focus on problem-based learning. There's a focus on creativity and curiosity in Fairhouse. And I suppose depending on the school communities and the families and the people that are involved, there are different areas that become a focus. And so each school takes on, I suppose, an identity of their own. But for all of us, the grounding is within the ethos and the importance of the students to everything that we do. So this year, for example, is a year like no other with our COVID health and safety procedures, but we have involved students in reviewing those procedures, and we're getting constant feedback on how things are going for students and if there's anything we can do differently. And that's something that was commended. We had a recent inspection on our COVID health and safety procedures, and the inspectors thought that was a really great idea. Another thing we're very excited about this year is that students are going to be involved in subject department planning. And you know, really, I have these discussions with other Educate Together principals, and these are the kind of things that we take for granted, and we share these ideas, and we share the learning as we try out, I suppose, these more innovative ways of approaching schools life. And it is quite significant that our teachers are open to the idea of having students sit in on professional meetings to plan what particular learning looks like within the subject departments. And I think that's another very important thing about the Educate Together ethos, that innovation and that openness. And I think that is pretty unique to Educate Together. I mean, all schools do a great job. I think all schools try really hard to meet the needs of their students. But what makes the Educate Together ethos special is that we name it as who we are and what we do. And it is quite transformative. As I mentioned earlier, innovation in teaching and learning is really important to us. It forms a significant part of the Educate Together blueprint for second level schools, which I'm sure if you're interested in Educate Together as a patron, that's something you might have read. And if you haven't, it's a really good read, and it is very well regarded for its innovative ideas. But you know, I can really vouch for how passionate Educate Together school leaders are about teaching and learning. And that's very significant, because when teaching and learning forms a part of the day-to-day conversation in schools, it has a really, I suppose, significant driver on success for students. We focus on ensuring that our teaching and learning methods are the best they can be, and also we are very tech savvy. I think that's safe to say. We have an interest in using technology to enhance learning, and spend a lot of time working within our schools and across schools to ensure that technology is being used to enhance learning in the classroom, and also for students to develop their own really strong learning habits and develop that metacognition, tapping into how they learn themselves and activating themselves as agents of their own learning. And we were in a very strong position when lockdown came last March 12th, that on the 13th our school was up and running as normal. Every student had a device, and we could run the timetable as normal, and we never missed a day or a class really thereafter. And that's the value, I suppose, of having not just a startup, but also a startup school with an ethos that is committed to innovation and ensuring that these technologies are available to our students and are being used really effectively. another really important facet of the Educate Together ethos and what that means day to day is our focus on building positive relationships within the school community. So that's between students and teachers, and also between the school and home. We involve parents in the education of their child, and in doing so, we ensure that there is strong communication between the school and home, and that communication is centred on getting to know the child and what the child needs in order to be their best self. That comes about through that openness and willingness to engage and discuss what's happening in the school and looking for feedback. So again, it is very normal and regular that parents are asked by email, in surveys, in focus groups, being invited in to get their opinion and checking in regularly to see how they feel their child is getting on and how well they're doing. And again, it's in the small, simple ways that the ethos can be obvious. So, for example, this year, because of the COVID restrictions, many schools have had no opportunity to run a parent-teacher meeting. But because it is so important to us that we'll be able to feed back to parents how their child is getting on, we ran Teams video meetings with our parents. So, it wouldn't sit well with us that we would just discard a parent-teacher meeting because we can't have them in person. So that extra time and effort will be made to ensure that parents and teachers and students have that opportunity to meet and discuss their learning. And this is very powerful in ensuring that students will do their very best. I suppose in addition to that, the benefit of the ethos also is in ensuring that the students get a sense of themselves as people, but also get a sense of themselves within their communities and within the outside world. So they get a sense of what's happening around them and being in a position whereby that's discussed as part and parcel of every class, really. So we have an hour of ethical education every week, but in addition to that, there would be a strong focus within each of the different subjects that ethical issues or world issues will be discussed wherever possible. And so the children get a great sense of themselves and their role in their community and the outside world, and that's very powerful. And it's something you will see. I know parents of Sandymount Park students will comment on the development that they see within their own students, that they come out of primary school and they might be quite shy and introverted, and by the end of first year they feel like they have transformed. They're much happier to speak up and speak out and have learned how to express themselves. And that's because we've put a lot of time and energy into facilitating that with students and also teaching them. Not everyone, it is a skill that can be learnt. So we've a strong belief that, being human is all about relationships, the relationship with self and others, and with the world around you and your cognitive abilities. And so we've spent a lot of time and energy seeking to build those positive relationships across the whole school community and ensuring that we provide a safe and happy learning environment where all students can thrive. So, schools are complex places. There's lots of variables. I'm sure you all, parents know best all of the influences that affect students and what they're doing. And it's not that, an Educate Together ethos can solve all those issues, but what it does is, I suppose, we meet children where they're at and we respect them for who they are, and we just embrace difference. So we're not afraid of difference, and we embrace difference and ensure that we're meeting the children where they are, and we're taking the time and the interest to get to know the child and their family to bring them on. And I know in Sandymount Park, we have very high expectations for our students and their behaviour. And we also have high support, and that's very important within the Educate Together ethos, in that students are, as much as is possible, presented with all the tools to enable them to reach their full potential. So Jerry, I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like me to add there or to talk about.
There's a couple of questions just after coming, so I might just throw them out. So I'm sorry about this, Paula.
No, that's fine.
So one of the questions is, just let me get it up here, and apologies from looking away from the screen. How much variety in subjects can we expect to be offered by a new school? And would the students be able to drive the availability of these if they requested them? Okay, so there's a couple of things, I suppose, to consider there. So
And I just see another question, which I think I'll answer as part of it. Someone has asked there, does the curriculum differ? So no, so there are often misperceptions that in some way an Educate Together secondary school is in some way different to another school. We aren't. All the same circulars and rules and laws that the department put out apply to an Educate Together secondary school as they do to any other secondary school. It is the ethos which makes us different. Other than that, our management body is the JMB, and we have the same junior cycle, senior cycle as every other second level school in Ireland. In terms of a new school and a startup, obviously we wish to provide, any startup school would want to provide a rich curriculum, but it is often based around, I suppose, the availability of staff and teachers' expertise in those first couple of years. And that kind of, I suppose, take many different forms. So, for example, I'll speak from my experience. So, you know, I'm very keen at teaching and learning is what we're passionate about. And I'm very keen that we would have subject specialists teaching their subjects. So we tried very hard to get as big a range of subjects in that first year as we could. And so we had art and music, business, we had history and geography, science and French, Irish, English, maths. So at that particular year, we couldn't get another language. So in the first year, we could only offer French. And in our second year again, we were keen to see if we could add languages. So we had a very successful recruitment period this summer. So for example, this year we have also added Spanish and German. So recruitment can have a big influence on the subjects that are offered, and also possibly in terms of practical subjects, what facilities are available. So, you know, we had classics in our second year added to the curriculum because it's a subject that didn't need a specialist room, and also students were very passionate about it, and we were fortunate to get a teacher who taught classics. So there's a number of different things at play. So you might ask, can students influence the subjects that are picked? And I suppose there might be, you know, some. Often, I know, for example, other Educate Together principals have surveyed parents in advance to see which is their language of preference. So for example, would you prefer that the first cohort take Spanish, or would they prefer French? And the principal might try very hard to, for example, find a Spanish teacher if that was the preference. But if they couldn't, it may be French. But I think definitely there's huge willingness there to have as wide a variety of subject choice for students as possible. But as you well know, there is a recruitment crisis, and so certain subject areas will be difficult to recruit for. And that's probably the biggest curtailment that might be had in a curriculum.
Thanks very much for Paul. Now there's another question that I might ask you. Does technology replace school books, or is that technology complement traditional paper-based learning? My apologies for that. Okay,
so I mean, paper-based learning has not been replaced because, as we know, state exams are paper-based. And also the art of handwriting and good presentation and expressing your thoughts whilst writing them is really important. And I don't think anyone's throwing away that skill yet. So in terms of textbooks, that could be choice. I know some schools have iPad, ebooks and textbooks. Personally, I would say that's maybe a more expensive option. So junior cycle is different. The learning is broader. We're meeting learning outcomes. And if you are confined, for example, to just one textbook, the student learning is very restricted because you're restricting them to learning or exploring what is within one textbook. So many schools, you know, move away from having simply a textbook, particularly at junior cycle. The benefit of the iPad is that it opens up, well, for example, we use iPads, it opens up the learning. We use Teams and OneNote, the Microsoft Suite as our virtual learning environment. And so most teachers in our school currently would produce their own content, but we do have ebooks for some subjects. So for example, maths, a teacher could spend a lot of time creating their own questions, which might not be the best use of their time. So we have an ebook whereby a teacher might take some questions and maybe get some questions from somewhere else. So, you know, the iPad is not, it's not an either or with an iPad or some sort of a notebook or a textbook that really, I suppose, would narrow down the possibilities that are within the use of technology. So, you know, Teams and OneNote, for anyone who uses them, are really powerful tools, and they open up the learning and allow the students to not just access learning, but create their own content. And again, that those skills students build up very quickly, and it's something that parents can really see development in their child's abilities to create content and tune in and control their own learning in very significant ways. But we would also have a very, very strong focus on how important presentation of work is. And I have seen that it was commended in a report of our own, but other Educate Together secondary schools, if you go online onto the education.ie website and look at the inspection reports from the Educate Together secondary schools, you'll see that it's often commented on how well that movement from digital learning to paper-based learning, that seamless movement between the two, you will see that that is commented on in a very positive way in many of the Educate Together secondary schools.
Paula, if I just one more question,
that's fine.
I'll let you have a drink of water after that. And it's a sort of, might be able to answer some of it myself. So how do Educate Together manage the new fabric of our multiracial society? So, like we call our schools diverse, and we're very proud that we do that. So how do you manage that on a day-to-day basis, or does it need managing?
I mean, I would say no, is the honest answer. You know, there's such diversity in schools, but I mean, isn't that our communities and our environment? And, you know, some communities have very little diversity and some have a lot of diversity, and that comes down more to where you live rather than possibly the school. But we just, all children are treated, you know, equally for who they are. I don't think there is I suppose, I mean, it's hard to know. Sometimes when you've been in the Educate Together ethos for a long time, you stop noticing things that other people sometimes come into the school and they pass comment and, oh my goodness, that's really lovely that you do things a particular way, or that students were involved in this. So sometimes I forget maybe what we're doing that sets us apart as different. But you know, if your fundamental attitude, and it isn't something that's difficult, is to just treat each child as an individual and meet them where they're at, I think there isn't any difficulty in embracing diversity. Again, it's celebrated. These small things are celebrated. You know, people share their background, they share their stories. We would often, so for example, during lockdown, we had one whole school day during the closure was dedicated to our ethical education curriculum, and students had to contribute something about, they had selected this themselves, about their own background and maybe what was different. And it was small things. You know, we had students with parents from America, from France, from Brazil, from all over, and they just shared that. And it's a way of sharing who you are and what you are, and it just provides a richness to the conversation and to the friendships and the relationships that really is a benefit.
Okay, thanks very much, Paula. I'll let you take a break there for a second.
Okay.
We might get ready for our next speaker. But just there's a question here that I'd just like to answer as well. So there's a question, and my main concern would be that the new school will be the guinea pig school. How would you deal with the apprehension many parents would have about the start of school and teething issues? Myself and my colleagues, Jennifer and Niall, we work with new schools every year. So it's sort of our job to try and convince parents and students and even teachers to take jobs. But we have a vision. Educate Together has a vision, and it's up to us to sort of put that vision across. We can point to our excellent schools, our very dedicated principals, our parents who get involved in our schools, not merely in the starting phase, but also support the teaching that goes on in the schools as well. So I don't think we will be the guinea pig school. Obviously, at the start of any school's life, you start small and you build big. So this school will be a 1,000 pupil school in a relatively short period of time. So, and when the school is small, and I think Paul, if it comes back maybe later on, might say that when the school is small, it has a much different atmosphere. Obviously, when the school grows, there's more staff comes in, more pupils come in, more subject choices, everything else. But there's something to be said about having a very small school community that's working very, very closely with each other, trying to build something for the future. And I think that's the rewarding bit about opening a new school and building up a new school community. So I just might have a look and see if we're just waiting for our next speaker. Do sports have to take a back seat in startup schools? Not necessarily. If the school opens in temporary accommodation, and we might talk a little bit about accommodation later on, obviously we won't have a big sports hall, but as a 1,000 pupil school, eventually the school will have a very big sports hall and lots of facilities. Our schools get involved with, we invite local clubs in, the local rugby club, the local GAA club in, the local soccer club. The school will have a PE teacher, and we will be making use of outdoors, or the school will be making use of outdoors. Once again, it's about the creativity that the teachers can bring to this, and also what the students want as well. Lots of our schools operate in temporary accommodation at the very start without access to sports facilities. And once again, if the school is small, you can do an awful lot as well, and as the school grows. So I think, are we ready for our next speaker? So I'd just like to introduce Nina Martin. So Nina is a student in one of our schools. Hi Nina, how are you? And thank you very much. I know you've come a very short notice here. So
it's okay, no problem.
So you've heard what Paul was saying, educate together schools from an educator's perspective. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your experience has been as a student.
Yeah, so I really like being part of an Educate Together school for many reasons. One being the positive relationships I feel that we build with teachers. In my school, we are on a first name basis with teachers. I think this helps build a friendly connection with our teachers. I'm also an iPad school, which I feel is a very innovative way of learning. I feel that students are immersed in school life, and I feel this helps us be able to stay connected to our peers and our teachers. We take a number of interesting and innovative subjects in school. One of these subjects I particularly enjoy is ethical education. In this class, we learn about many different world issues, whether they are political or cultural. I think this class really helps us connect with people of different cultures and religions, which really helps us build relationships with our peers and also people we meet outside of school. This class is one of the many ways I feel our Educate Together school experience enables us as students to become more empathetic and understanding people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a quick question. You mentioned there your own first name terms with your teachers. Was that new to you, or were you used to that? Did you attend an Educate Together primary school?
Yeah, I did actually go to an Educate Together primary school, and we were on a first name basis with those teachers as well. And I think that really helped us feel very close to our teachers. And it felt like they were sort of like our peers, not just people, you know, that we saw as authority figures. And I think this really helped us like learn and feel sort of comfortable in our school life.
Okay, very good. And just in terms of maybe students who hadn't attended Educate Together primary schools, obviously it might be a bit of a transition from primary to secondary. So maybe had you got friends who made that transition, and how are they finding the school?
I do. I've a couple of friends. Sorry.
Particularly ones who weren't in Educate Together primary schools.
So I have a couple of friends who weren't in primary schools, Educate Together primary schools. And I think at first the transition was strange for them, but they got used to it after a while, and I think they liked it. I think it's very formal to call your teachers by their second names, and they really liked that sort of like comfortable environment it created.
Okay, that's brilliant. Listen, thank you very much, Nina. I really appreciate it, and I know you were talking short notice there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I might just have a quick look at the question, and once again, apologies for looking away. I have to just look at the screen here. Does sport have to take a back seat in startup schools? Absolutely not. Sport is very important. Maybe Paula might say something on that. I think Paula's muted.
Yeah, Jerry, I'm happy to talk about that. As I said, really, because we're so focused on building positive relationships, one of the key ways to do that is through extracurricular activities. So I think I can safely say that all of the Educate Together schools that I work with closely also have a similar focus on extracurricular activities. So we don't have a sports hall, but we do make links in the community. So our students have played hockey, rugby. They were there today after school playing soccer. They play basketball. We've introduced ultimate frisbee. We have a sports kit which the students designed. We have played many teams and matches with other schools. So no, I mean, students love sport and they thrive on sport, and it is really an important part of school life. And I think huge efforts are made to ensure that in startup schools, students are not denied those opportunities. And every effort is made to ensure that sport features strongly for students.
Thank you, Paula. So just another question before we move on a little bit. So what positives are there to choosing a new school over an established school? That's probably very difficult to sort of answer. I mean, there are many reasons. I think the main benefit of maybe choosing a new school over an established school, certainly if it's an Educate Together school, obviously it would be for ethos. There's no other Educate Together secondary school in these two school planning areas. So obviously, if I was a parent looking, it would be from ethos, obviously. The school, as I said, the school will be quite small when we start off, but it will grow. So there is some satisfaction, and my own children were students in pupils in startup Educate Together primary schools, and there is a sense of community being built as well, particularly in new areas. Now, maybe this school isn't going into a brand new area, but there's a sense of community of coming together, a sense of purpose, a sense of achievement. And every small little victory that the school has on its way up, whether it's winning its first basketball game or winning its first hurling match or getting a football game, all these are little victories that sort of resonate throughout the school. In terms of the students themselves, the students will always be the oldest students in the school. They will be the trailblazers. They will be making the rules that the other kids have to follow. They'll be making the mistakes, and they'll be correcting their mistakes as they move forward as well. So from a student point of view, it is very rewarding, because we do expect a lot of our students. We actually do, not in a negative way, but certainly in a positive way, and we encourage that involvement. So there's something we're trying to create leaders, and so the first students in our school really become leaders, and we ask them to look after the younger students as they come in and as they move through the school as well. So there's lots of positives about getting involved in an Educate Together startup school. I sort of hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour of certainly that's my personal experience, what it has been. I'm just looking at questions. We might just move on a little bit, I think. Okay. Now our next speaker, our next speaker was supposed to have been Daniel McRae, one of our parents who's working in our startup campaign. Now, unfortunately, we were having technical issues. Okay, and we weren't able to get Daniel in, but I have a little bit of if you just bear with me for a second, I'll just read this out. If my phone doesn't die on me, which it probably will. So this is from Daniel McRae, who's working very closely with our startup group of parents. Okay, so this is my third campaign for an Educate Together school. 8 years ago, I worked with an incredible team to get Shellybank and Sandymount, and 2 years later was very proud to get Dun Laoghaire Educate Together opened. Both of my children are in Monkstown Educate Together National School. Like Educate Together, I believe we learn best when we learn together. When we talk about education, we are really talking about what kind of Ireland we want in the future, and I know what I want. One where equality is at the core of everything they do. So time is out for outdated models of what little girls and boys can be. I want a school that teaches and doesn't preach. A school where difference isn't tolerated or accommodated or indulged, but where it is respected, understood, and celebrated. So this is the promise of an Educate Together secondary school, and I, for one, will do everything I can to make sure it happens. Vote, please vote, and tell everyone you know to vote. The time is now. So listen, thanks very much for that, Daniel. Once again, apologies for for not having Daniel here to speak. So, so listen, I'm going to just move on a little bit. Time is moving. So I just want to mention briefly that the ESRI did a research project with Educate Together recently. You may have seen, it was actually mentioned on the news and newspapers, etc. So just a couple of things. I just highlighted a few things that sort of stood out to me. So, so Educate Together second level schools have more student diversity on average than the typical Irish school. Okay. Educate Together schools have a strong culture of respectful teacher-student relationships, and I think that goes back to a little bit what Paula and what Nina were saying as well, particularly around the first name terms. That helps, and we're very proud of the relationships that our students and our teachers have. Educate Together schools have a strong culture of respect and diversity, and I think there's a question about that earlier on. So we respect the diversity, and we don't just indulge or include. We actually respect and encourage. So Educate Together schools have a diverse range of beliefs and identities amongst the students and also amongst the staff as well. Once again, that's very important to us, and it's dealt with in our ethical education program. We don't have faith formation classes in our schools. We don't teach children a particular religion or way to think, but we encourage diversity. We encourage students to be able to express themselves in ways of religion as well. Okay. We also have a diverse range of socio-economic backgrounds in our schools. And we also have, and this is very important, and I think this is something that Paula mentioned as well, there's a large amount of students who express a strong sense of belonging at the school as well. And I think that's vitally important, and it's what we're trying to achieve. So just before I move on, let me think and see if I have a question here. Okay, so not a question from Stephen. Not a question, but I believe there would be a great value in the experience of witnessing a school acquiring its own culture and personality. And I think that which speaks to the heart of what the ethos of an Educate Together school. It's not prescribed, it's not top down, it's actually built from the bones of the school up. Resonates through the student body, through the teaching body, and through the parents as well. So I'm just, once again, I'm just flicking down through these questions. How many pupils are needed to start school? There's no real number, and I'll probably deal with this a little bit later on, but generally we open with around 48 students, which will be about 2 stream. The amount of students we have in first year is dependent upon the accommodation that's available. And once again, I don't want to get bogged down into that this moment. I'll talk about that later on. So I might just move on if I can. Okay. So I just want to talk about a little bit about the process and the mechanics of all of that. And we're going to be showing a video in a few minutes just about how to actually interact with the Department of Education website. So if you can just look at the map that's on the screen at the moment, okay? So we have Booterstown, Blackrock, Dun Laoghaire Regional Solution. So there's 2 black areas on the map. So the first, on the left-hand side is Booterstown, Blackrock, and on the right-hand side we have Dun Laoghaire. So what these are school planning areas. So the whole country is divided up into lots of school planning areas. The fact that these 2 school planning areas have been put together for one school means it's a regional solution school. So that's what the regional solution means. So in terms of the map and what it is, the Department of Education is going to survey parents with students between a certain age, and I'll talk about that in a second, who live in this area, and they sort of define that by your ERC code. So when you interact with the department's website, if it accepts your ERC code, it means that you're included in the school planning areas. If it doesn't, you're not. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a few seconds. Just want to talk a little bit about admissions, and I know we have some questions about that as well. So admissions to Educate Together secondary schools are very similar. So the admissions policy will give priority access to students who live in the defined school planning area. So that means that if you live in either of the 2 school planning areas, Booterstown, Blackrock, or Dun Laoghaire, then you will have priority access to the school. Educate Together second level schools do not have feeder schools. So there's going to be no school listed as a feeder school. Everybody who lives in the defined catchment area or the school planning areas will have priority access. If there's an excess of admission applications over the amount of places we have, then we will run a lottery to decide on places. And this will be in place for the first year. In the second year, it's a little bit different. We then put siblings number one. So if you have a sibling of a child in the school, okay, then you will get a priority place. Now that doesn't mean that we reserve places for past pupils or children of past pupils or anything like that. In order to avail of the sibling part of the admissions policy, your sibling must be attending the school at the same time as you. We also count adopted children and foster children as being siblings for this purpose as well. Okay, so so outside catchment area would be anybody from outside the two school planning areas. Once again, they will apply for places. They'll be put on a enrollment list, and once again, if that section is oversubscribed, we would also do a lottery and place them on a waiting list as well for the school. The admissions procedure will open for 3 to 4 weeks, and then once it closes, anybody else who applies will be a late application and will be placed on a waiting list as well. I might talk about that a little bit later on as well. And just if anybody's any real questions on that, if you could sort of throw them in. I think we might have a couple that I might be able to get to. So just once again, just bear, I'm just flicking through these. Now I'm just going to move on. I can't really see any at the moment. Okay. So I know there are definitely questions around accommodation. Okay, so first thing to say, it's the most important thing to say, is the Department of Education will be responsible for the accommodation. Just prior to the start of this process, the department just sent us a quick email just with information about the process, and in reference to the accommodation for this school, it's the quote on the left-hand side, so I'll read it out. So a 3-acre site at Newtown Park Avenue, Blackrock, County Dublin, referred to as the Abilene or the Abilene, I'm not sure how you pronounce that property. The site size constraints will limit options to the development of one post-primary school. So that's from the Department of Education. Excuse me. And on your left-hand side, if people are familiar, this is the N11, okay? This is where it joins Newtown Park Avenue. And this is, I think, if you can see my mouse moving there, this is the property, the 3 acres that the department have acquired. We don't know at the moment whether, we know that this is the permanent site that's been acquired for the school. We're not sure whether the department or what plans the department have for temporary accommodation at the moment. Generally speaking, the department won't discuss any accommodation arrangements with prospective patrons. It's only when patronage has been awarded that the department will talk to the patrons about that. That's as much about the accommodation as we know, okay? And if you're from the local area, you're probably more familiar with that site than I would be. This is one of the issues that once the patronage is awarded, that the patron will be in touch with people to let them know what the situation is. And as I said, we can't really say any more than that at the moment because we just don't know any more information and the department won't tell us any more information. But just let me have one more quick look here and see is there anything. Okay, that's Jennifer. Okay, so we're going to move on again, okay? There's a couple of questions that are in there I'll answer later on in the general question and answer session, okay? So if Educate Together is awarded patronage at the school, and hopefully we will be, this is a sort of a proposed timeline just to give you an indication of what is likely to happen, certainly in the first couple of months, okay? So obviously we'll let parents know. So we have a mailing list and we have our social media and the Educate Together website. So if Educate Together is awarded patronage, we will let you know as soon as that happens. So we will immediately commence the admissions process and principal recruitment process. So these will take about 4 weeks. So we'll run both of them in parallel with each other, okay? So we were started talking about this earlier on. So if patronage was awarded, say mid-December, we'd probably run the admissions process and the principal recruitment process over the Christmas break and maybe start offering places around about maybe mid-January, and that's around the same time that we would be having a recruiting for the principal. But once again, it is dependent on when patronage is announced and of course whether Educate Together is awarded patronage. We would also be looking to have a new parents meeting, so this would be probably another public meeting, but focus more on the prospective parents for 2021, okay? I think we'd like to have that meeting before we actually offered places, so we may have some update around the accommodation. But once again, that's likely to happen. It's dependent on when the announcement will be made. So it could be January, it could be February. We'll also begin teacher recruitment in April or May. That's fairly standard for all second level schools. That's when most recruitment is done. And we'll be looking to have a full complement of teachers in place, certainly by June, July. That would be the plan. And obviously, work on preparing the accommodation will be ongoing. In recent years, once the department have acquired a permanent site, they tend to put prefabs on that site. So I think that's probably what we are looking. The amount of prefabs we don't know. As I said, generally speaking, we've opened with a two-stream, like 48 students. Bearing in mind that 1,000 pupil school will take in 180 students every year. So it's really cutting back the numbers, but we will probably start small. Obviously, if we had a bigger demand than that, we would go back to the department looking for additional accommodation, but there's no guarantee we would get that. We would also hope, and this is an experience in recent years as well, that we would have science facilities, science lab facility, home economics, and as Paula was saying, that we will be able to run a full suite of subjects for our students, bearing in mind that we might have to cut our cloth around multiple languages and things like that. Okay, and of course, once again, this is a proposed timeline, assuming Educate Together was awarded the patronage, and it's all dependent on when the department might make that announcement. Okay, so just let me see if I can answer any questions again. I think this may be not just the curriculum different from other schools. No, it doesn't. The curriculum is exactly the same. Where we would differ is our ethical education program. That's the responsibility of Educate Together and the schools to deliver. So, but everything else will be the similar curriculum that's available in all secondary schools. We may have answered that, but just for anybody who might be outside the catchment area, obviously, as I said, we have to provide priority access to students from the catchment area, but that does not mean that if there's places available that we can't put outside, and we have done that in lots of our schools as well. Once again, it's probably dependent on the amount of places that we have available, and it's obviously dependent on the amount of demand that we have for the school as well. We would probably be able to speak better to that once patronage has been announced, and whatever issue, it'll be the same for all patron bodies as well, the whole issue of admissions. Okay, just leave that. I think we've answered that. Okay, so let's going to move on a little bit. So we're coming to the part of the meeting where we're going to start to talk about the OPPS website. So this is the Department of Education website. We have a link to it at the end, so don't worry about that. So what we might do is just try to take you through what you see when you interact with the website. So I'll just play this a little bit. Hopefully this works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. Okay, so it hasn't worked. It's gone to the very end. And we haven't. Sorry, I just got a bit panicky there. I wasn't expecting that. So when you arrive at the website, this is the very front page. Okay, so on the top area of home, who are we, etc. So you can actually interact with these buttons as well, and it brings up information. And I would, if you have a bit of time, I'd advise you just to have a look in there, because there is some very good information in there. Okay. Now, one thing that's not in there, and this is something that we have raised with the Department of Education before, and we will again. The Department of Education are surveying students who will begin attending the school over the next 5 years. That would be 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25. So that would equate to students who are in primary school at the moment between 2nd and 6th class. So they're not surveying students younger than that, okay? Now, we're not sure why the department do that, but we're also not sure why the department don't actually say that up front, because we only really noticed it when parents were contacting us to say that they couldn't interact with the system. So, so just to clarify, it's students who are currently in second, third, fourth, fifth, or 6th class in primary, okay? So once you're ready to proceed on the page, we have express your patronage preference. Hopefully the line below it won't be available, because obviously we looked at this before the page went live. So what you do is you click on express your patronage preference. and then this is the next page you come into. Okay, so there's 4 processes being run simultaneously, and once again you can still access the information on the top there. So obviously we're interested in County Dublin, so you click the plus and there's Booterstown, Blackrock and Dun Laoghaire. This is the other school we are applying for, which is Gorey. So don't click on that, because this is about as far as you go if you click on that. So once again, once you click on Booterstown, Blackrock and Dun Laoghaire, you're given an option to pick your survey language. Now this is different than the language of instruction, which is further on in the process. So this is just for the language of the survey as we progress through it. Okay. So the next page then, there's lots of information here. Very important at the top, please note you will need your children's PPS number in order to complete the survey. You'll also need your air code. So this is where you enter your air code. So full postal address or air code. If you enter your air code in there and click search, it'll come up. If you don't know your air code, you can find it here. You also have to tick these boxes to confirm that you're the parent legal guardian. You have to confirm that the children that you will name later on are resident at the address provided. And you have to confirm that they're not currently enrolled in primary school. So we move forward again. So this is actually the bottom part of that previous page. So once again, you have to enter your child's air code. So once again, you enter your child's air code in here, same as previously, and it will populate. If you see this little message here, postcode found, address populated below. Okay, and then once you're doing all that, you proceed, and you go to the second page. Okay, so once again, more important notes here. This is like the data protection page here, so you can just have a read of that. Click accept and click next. Okay, so this is where we get down to the nuts and bolts of it. Okay, so what you need here is your first name and your surname. You need your child's details as well, child's surname, date of birth, obviously, and this is where you put the PPS number and what year to start. So, for example, if you have a child in 6th year, they'll be starting school in 2021. Child in 5th class in primary school will be starting in 2022, etc. If you have a second child, click that. Do exactly the same for the second child. If you had a third child, you would click add a third child, etc., all the way down, and fill out the options there. Okay, so this is where at the start I said there was a language preference. That was the language for the language of the process itself. So this is where you choose your preferred language of instruction. You have 3 options here. You have English, Irish, and no preference. You can pick one of them. Just to clarify, Educate Together is applying for an English language voluntary secondary school here, but we have said in our application that if the Department of Education asks us to, and if there was sufficient demand, we would open an AINID in the school. So an AINID is maybe a stream or 2 of Irish instruction going up through the school. That's actually the case in Harold's Cross Educate Together Secondary School, which opened this year. But the department have said that they won't open the AINID until the school is in permanent accommodation. So that's still an option here. It's not for us to decide that. Okay, so once again, pick your preferred language of instruction, English, Irish, or no preference. Okay, so a number of school patrons have applied to run the new school. You'll be asked to rank patrons in order of your preference. So just a little bit about this in ordering the patrons. This is not a PR exercise, so it's really a first past the post. We're sort of unsure why they want parents to rank people in preference. Maybe that's just because that's the way we're voting in this country. But just to clarify, if you give one to Educate Together, that's fine. So you don't actually have to continue on down the list if you don't want to. Obviously, if you want to, you can. But as far as we know, no second or third preferences have ever counted. It's usually just the first, whoever you put number 1 to. So just remember that as well. Once again, you have to confirm that you've read and understood the patron information. So click here if you want to have a look at the different patron bodies and who they are. You can click here before you continue on. So this is the voting page, and just to clarify that the options available here may not be the ones that are available to you, and in fact they're not the ones available to you. But you spot the Educate Together while we have the Educate Together logo. and this is where you pick your preference for number 1. There might be somebody else here, and there might be somebody else here as well. But look for the Educate Together logo, and obviously we would like you to press number 1. You click next down here, you obviously confirm, click next. And this is where you sort of check what you've done. Your patron preference is, your ranking is, and then Educate Together number 1, obviously. And once you finish this, you've basically committed yourself. But you can go back to the stage and make a change, or if you need to, if you think you need to. Once you've done all of that, you click finish, and you come out. So unfortunately, this won't be there when you come out, but this is us for thanking you for voting. And remember that every vote counts in this process. So what we're asking you to do here tonight as well. So obviously we want you to express your preference for Educate Together, vote for Educate Together. It's been quite difficult to, normally we'd be very, very noticeable on the ground, and we'd have a lot of parents maybe at schools handing out leaflets. We'd probably be standing at shopping centres trying to spread the message, first of all, that the process is actually taking place. And that's quite a feat in itself, trying to raise the profile of the process. And obviously trying to convince parents to consider us as our number 1. So we don't have that facility this time. We really do require word of mouth. That's really how we get our message across. So if you can, if you want an Educate Together secondary school, could you please spread the word to your friends and family who might live in the catchment area? If you could share a post on social media, and if you get any more emails from us, you can share them to your friends as well. This is the link here. So if you want to express your preference for an Educate Together secondary school, you can click on this link. So it's bit.ly/vote ET 2021. Okay, so if you click on that, that will bring you, and it will direct you to the voting page. Okay, so we might just move on to our next. Hold on, sorry. There we go. So we come to the questions part, okay, and so we'll deal with some of the outstanding questions that have been coming in through the night, okay. So does the curriculum differ from other schools? I think we've sort of answered that. No, it doesn't, exactly the same, except for the ethical curriculum, which is developed by the school in conjunction with Educate Together. I think we've answered that one about the catchment area. We've sort of answered that. But just to clarify, so priority access will be given to students coming from the school planning area, catchment area, which will be Booterstown, Blackrock and Dun Laoghaire, and it's based on that map. So any communication that we send out in the future, if we are awarded patrons, will refer back to that map as the catchment area. Okay. Publish that. Okay, publish that. We've done that. Okay, so we started answering successful application. When will the principal be appointed? As soon as possible. If patronage had been awarded now, the principal could have started on the 1st of September. Obviously, we have to run the principal recruitment process. We're hoping that, once again, if Educate Together is awarded patronage, we would be appointing the new principal sometime around mid-January to the end of January. Once again, this is dependent on when patronage is announced, and we'd be looking for them to start as soon as possible. They could start the day after they're appointed. But once again, it really depends on when the department awards patronage. I think we sort of answered that one. I think we've answered that. Just apologies for looking away from this. I'm just looking at another screen. Sort of answered that. Is there a lag in the provision of sports and other facilities in the school? Well, okay, so the school will probably be opening in temporary accommodation. Well, will definitely be opening in temporary accommodation, probably in prefabs. Once again, we will have access to like a science lab, home ec room. There'll be space for the students, but we won't have our big 600 square metre PE hall. We won't have big woodworking rooms and lots of equipment in. But that doesn't mean that the students can't benefit from the full curriculum. Our teachers, our educators are very adept and very good at producing content and educating our children in surroundings that may not be the most salubrious. So the children don't really suffer from lack of facilities, but obviously we believe that the facilities should be there when the students start. So what would the admissions possibly be by catchment or house? So I've just told you priority access to students from the defined catchment area, which are the school planning areas as I've outlined. School won't have any feeder schools, and the sibling policy will be up and running for the second year, and we will give priority access to students, to siblings of students already in the school, not past pupils, and not the sons and daughters of past pupils in the future. There's another one here. So how do the schools perform the leaving? Well, we don't really have that many schools. I don't know if Paula would come in there maybe. I don't know if she's heard anything. I know maybe a couple of our schools have had a leaving cert class, and probably this year is probably not the best because of what happened with the leaving cert, but maybe Paula might be able to speak to that a little bit.
Yes, Jerry, as far as I know, the only school who has done a leaving cert so far, I think, was Hansfield. They had 6 years this year. Now, perhaps they're a year ahead and there's somebody else also. I suppose what that question alludes to really is maybe a fear with startups or Educate Together schools that in some way the teaching might be less or the academics might be less. I think the best evidence is, as I referenced earlier, is to go on to the education.ie website and look at the inspection reports. You know, the inspectors regularly come into schools, they do subject inspections and then whole school evaluations, and they give very, very clear and accurate detail about what the inspectors find when they go in, and you'll find them very, very positive around teaching and learning and very strong, and that's probably your best evidence. As Jerry said, you know, there isn't really, we don't have a lot of schools to base results on. And I suppose the key thing is also is maybe speak to parents of students in Educate Together schools and ask them how they're getting on and how their learning has developed and how the children have progressed. You know, I suppose league tables in the Sunday Times once a year are a narrow measurement for the success in schools, and it's only one feature. You know, it's hard to tell whether a particular set of leaving results represent a great success or a disappointment. You have to know the child and what it means, but I suppose that evidence isn't there yet. Often parents are very concerned that in some ways there's no track record for a school. You know, other local schools, they know neighbours and cousins, and you know, there's a long history associated with the school, and it's you know, people can be afraid to pass that up. I mean, I myself, my child started in a startup school in the first year, and I do appreciate what that feels like. You know, you're passing up more established schools and you want to be sure that you've made the right decision. I think the key thing is the dedication, the passion and the innovation that will exist in a startup school. And particularly in an Educate Together school because of the blueprint, and you know, we live that blueprint every day. It's not a dead document, it's a document that's well thumbed through for every Educate Together school leader. It's something that we're passionate about, and so tapping into our students' abilities and tracking their abilities is something we take very seriously, and a focus on teaching and learning will benefit the students, and of course that will be seen then eventually in results, which of course are important. We want our students to do well and to be able to access any third level place that they want, and that is something we take seriously. I suppose to reassure parents of that it is a passion for Educate Together second level schools, and also not to underestimate the passion of teachers involved in startup schools. They have a lot to prove, and they take that very seriously, and it's not to be discounted. There was another question earlier about referencing, you know, I suppose just that value of a startup, and I mentioned some of the challenges for school this year around COVID and what that means. So, for example, the school closure and being ready to embrace tech-enhanced learning. And also the return to school and staff being on board with the procedures and being ready to adapt very quickly to what those procedures meant for day-to-day school life. And being in a new school, you tend to have, you know, you've recruited very selectively for teachers who have that capacity to grow in a startup, innovative environment. So these things tend to happen very fluidly, you know. in contact with principals in other schools, in more established schools, it's much harder to get the change of practice to make sure all staff are on board with innovation and technology, and even with the small changes to practice, like adapting to a different form of parent-teacher-student meeting. And they're the really key benefits to a startup setting, and in particular an Educate Together startup setting.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Paula. I'm just a bit conscious that time is moving on, so I'll just give a couple of questions here. When do you expect it will be built? Do you expect prefab so long? Fortunately, we can't really answer that question. Once again, the department won't discuss any issue around accommodation with prospective patrons. It's only when patronage is awarded. But we will keep parents, and once again, if we are awarded patronage, we'll keep you fully updated on that as we move along. Is there a normal time frame? I'm assuming that that's related to prefabs or building or something like that. And I think Jennifer has answered that. We assume the Department of Education do own the site, have owned for a couple of years now, so we would expect that there's been some pre-planning or maybe even the planning application gone in. Once again, we're not in control of any of that, but it's something that we will be taking a very close look at if we are awarded patronage. So question here, so my daughter has learning difficulties and is suited to more practical subjects like home economics, art, etc. Have these, absolutely, so all of these subjects are offered as part of in first year. There's no issue with that, and you mentioned special needs as well. So we're very conscious that, particularly in South Dublin, where we've opened quite a lot of schools in the past few years, and where accommodation might be an issue for some of them, and there is a distinct lack of special education places available in the South City area. It's something that we've spoken to the Department of Education many times about. Whether or not we actually have an SEN class or an ASD class when the school opens in temporary accommodation is something, once again, that we'll have to leave for the department. But just to clarify that, the year that Paula opened Sandymount Park, we did open an ASD class there, reduced size because of the accommodation issues. And once again, Paula is still in her temporary accommodation, and that ASD class is going to 6. We absolutely want to work with everybody who might be affected by that. And once again, if we're awarded patronage of the school, this will be front and foremost of our agenda as well. In relation to it, schools don't ask, can they open units or classes? The Department of Education have to contact the school about that. And once again, whether or not the department will provide the accommodation for it, while the school might be in temporary accommodation, that might be an issue. But once again, it's something that we're very concerned about, something that we're very willing to do, and once again, it's something that we will update you on in the future as we go forward. If there's one more question, okay, so this is very interesting. If you voted for another school body and now want to change your mind, is it too late? Our understanding is you can go back in, and it's your last vote that counts. So if you go back into the OPPS website, go through the whole process again using the same details, they'll count your last preference, okay? And I hope that it's not, you haven't voted for Educate Together and you're going back in to change it for somebody else, because if so, no, you can't, okay? So that's the short answer to that, but yes, you can, obviously. Just another quick question here. Do parents have the same appointing the principal? Not necessarily. So Educate Together will be appointing the principal in the first instance, and then once the board of management is established, then the board of management of the school technically employs. But we generally have a parent on our interview panel. So our interview panels generally consist of the school manager, who's either myself or maybe Jennifer or Niall from the office. We would then have maybe 2 or 3 existing school principals as well on the panel, and we reserve a place for a parent, possibly somebody who's involved in the startup group, maybe somebody who has HR experience. So while parents don't vote on who to appoint as principal, certainly their voice is heard when we are appointing, if that makes sense. Do all the parents have to be active participants, or only those that would like to do so? Is it optional? Absolutely, it's all optional. Obviously, we'd love you to get involved, but we know that a school is not the end of people's lives, that they do have other lives. People are very busy. We only ask people to get involved that can. We wouldn't expect somebody to do something who couldn't do it. What we do expect is people would be open. If you agree to do something for the school, maybe do it. If you can't do it, that's fine. And as I said, there's opportunities on our board of management for people who are interested. We have patron nominees on the board, but we've also got parent nominees as well. All our schools have, I think, PTSAs, or there's some mad name now, I can't really remember what they are. So basically it's the parents and the teachers and the whole school community. So parents can get involved in that. There's 101 ways to get involved, but there's also, if you can't get involved, if you don't want to get involved, that's fine as well. There's no compulsion for you to do that. So listen, I think there's a few more questions. I may have answered most of them, I think, okay? As I said earlier on, we are recording this and we will put it up on our website and social media as soon as we can. We'll turn the questions that have come in. I hope we've answered most of them. I think Jennifer has answered most of them in the chat. I've tried to answer them as we go, but we will try and collect them and put them into a document that people can download as well. Just on your screen now, once again, just to clarify what we're asking you to do this evening, we want you to vote Educate Together, ET South Dublin 2021. That's the link directly to the Department of Education website. Voting ends next Monday, the 16th at 9 AM. That's very important. So don't leave it. Leave it to the weekend, but don't leave it till, you can do it last thing Sunday night, but first thing Monday morning is not a good idea. So if you're planning to get it done, maybe do it by Sunday night. Make sure your voice is heard. Vote Educate Together, and every vote counts. I'd like to thank Paula. I'd like to thank Jennifer, my colleague, Luke and Niall, who have been working away in the background. Luke producing, Niall on standby, Jennifer answering the questions. I'd like to thank Ian and Martin, who stood in at very short notice to talk to us tonight. I think that's just a small example of the type of student that we have in our schools, and we're really proud about that. Sorry to Daniel McCrae, he couldn't come in. He actually recorded a video, and we might put that up on our Facebook page if he allows us to do that. So once again, listen, thanks very much for your attention, and vote Educate Together South Dublin 2021. Thank you.